Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can everyone hear me okay? And can you see the slide? If you have any issues, please feel free to let us know in the chat box. Great. Seems like we're good to go. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today for an inside look into the Overstock personalization engine. Just a reminder that at the end of today's session, we will take a couple of questions from the audience. If you have any throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask in the chat box that should be at the bottom of your screen under Q&A. So we're here today casting to you from the mParticle offices in the Big Apple, New York City, as well as the Overstock offices in beautiful Utah. My name is Alexandra McGuire, and I'm in marketing for mParticle. Although I do have a background leading in-house acquisition teams for e-commerce, most recently coming from Gilt. We're also so excited to be joined by our special guest and partner, Craig Kelly, who is Group Product Manager, Marketing for Overstock.com. Welcome, Craig, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
It's our pleasure. Overstock has definitely remained relevant over more than 2 decades now, I think, with a winning business strategy and managed to stay relevant with expanded inventory and a personalized user experience. So we're so excited to dive into and learn more about the personalization engine and how it works. With more and more optionality cluttering the user experience, it's increasingly necessary to curate the shopping customer's experience for each individual shopper. For online retailers with deep inventory, the opportunity to impact the bottom line with personalization is greater now than it's ever been before. This year, Gartner predicts organizations with fully functioning online personalization will outsell companies without it by more than 30%. Plus, the mobile-centric world has increased online users' expectations to the point where 74% of customers feel frustrated when website content is not personalized to them, according to Infosys. And this helps make companies profitable. Smart personalization engine is not only drive a positive user experience, but according to Gartner, they can increase profits up to 15%. So how to begin? Identity is the foundation that makes personalization possible. A single organized user view is necessary for personalized one-to-one experiences to become possible. Identity enables marketing growth by leveraging first-party data on an individualized basis as opposed to broader segmentation. With unique user identity at the center of the marketing stack, machine learning can function across devices and across marketing channels as well. Now, having set the stage, let's hear from Craig about how Overstock succeeded at bringing personalization to life. So, Craig, do you mind starting off by telling us about your role with Overstock?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the group product manager for our marketing division at Overstock. Come from a background mostly in ad tech, and it's kind of been interesting for me over the past year here how that how the MarTech world is kind of catching up with some of the the learnings from ad tech over the past several years, and how you have these technologies that, and I think, generally started in the dollar and spend efficiency world, starting to be used to create real-time personalization and real-time coordination across all of the various marketing pieces. So my role here is working with a group of just absolutely amazing developers and product managers. We work on all of our push and email technology, our ad tech technology, which includes in-house DSP functionality and API-based campaign management. We have, a large infrastructure team, data science teams, content and UX technology, as well as promotions and co-op advertising, kind of all fall into the marketing umbrella. And my role is really how do we create efficient systems that can enable all of these various programs to speak to one another in a way that creates the best experience for our customers.
Great. What goals are you trying to accomplish currently in that role?
Yeah, so I would say, kind of the mission that I was given when I started at Overstock was, probably pretty typical of any marketing world, and it's been unachievable for a pretty long time in the digital world, and that's just, it boiled down to its essence. It's really to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time in the right place. And we think that that's something that the CDP space and mParticle in particular really helps us to do. When we talk about more macro level, what are the pieces around that? Obviously everybody's trying to do that, right? So there's when we dig into what are we trying to do, specifically to achieve that big view, and what's the macro context of what we have to be able to do in order to deliver that promise. One thing I would say is that we have an insanely competitive landscape, and it gets more competitive by the month. And so, one piece of that is we have to beat our competitors. And so kind of how do we do that? How do we become better than our competitors at achieving that mission of right person, right message, right time, right place? That to me is all about speed to market and efficiency. So how can we be most efficient in everything we do, especially our ad spend? When we talk about the types of dollars that our competitors are spending, we have to do it just as well and more efficiently. We have to have the right data structures in place to actually when you have all these various sources of data, you have to have a combined data structure that enables all of the channels to talk to each other. And then you kind of have to have the identity piece too. And so, the vast majority of our traffic is web traffic. And so, but we also have a massive email infrastructure, and we have a rapidly growing app install base. So how do we manage identities across different, not just fingerprinting, but across multiple different types of identities that we have and that we rely on, and how do we standardize them into a data structure that allows us to pick the best identity for the right person, so that we can follow that person as closely as possible in order to deliver just what she wants. And so that's kind of the high level and specific goals that we're really trying to solve here.
Those are some meaty goals. I think some other folks may share those goals, I have a feeling. So with that, what prompted you to look into a customer data platform?
Yeah, so this was, we did stumble upon it by accident. I think the fact that we've invested so heavily in the customer data platform space and all of the pieces around it has really enabled us to accelerate our progress more rapidly than I ever could have expected a year ago when we were first looking at this. But we stumbled into it when we're just reviewing those MarTech landscape diagrams, and they're absolutely insane. And we're kind of looking at how it's been growing year over year from, I think 5 years ago, there might have been like 300 players in the MarTech landscape, Lumascape type sheet. And now, you have, I think, like 1,500 last year. So the whole space is growing so rapidly. And so there's this, process internally here of, okay, what spaces do we want to play in? So not only has the number of vendors increased, but the number of spaces has also increased rapidly. Kind of what spaces do we want to play in, and then also, within each space, what vendor do we want to select? And so many choices, and it kind of brought us back to, okay, well, like, how do you actually keep up with that? And when we're researching, and that had been something that's kind of sitting in the back of our heads for a while, is everything's changing so fast, and we have limited resources just like everybody else in the world. How do we actually build something that can keep up with the pace of change? And so we were, on that landscape sheet, there was the customer data platform space, and we started to look into it. And it's like, aha, this is the piece. And while we don't believe in silver bullets here, it's and certainly nothing is ever perfect, but this is the piece that will build the promise of being able to actually keep up with the pace of change. And then as we dug into it more and more, we realized all of these additional benefits of things like cross-channel communication and taking unstructured data and being able to have generic data structures that will enable us to keep pace with everything. So there were lots of various pieces that went into kind of what prompted us to look for it. That was kind of by accident, and then when we did start looking into it, it really is how do you keep up?
Yeah, exactly. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's certainly the times that we are in today. So with that, would you talk a little bit to us about your marketing stack?
Yeah, so our marketing stack started, one thing that's been interesting about the past year is that we've basically built our marketing stack from the ground up in a year. That includes pieces for push automation and email automation. It includes where we had kind of all these disparate systems, we've upgraded in certain cases and connected pieces in other cases. But within a year and 8 months, in 8 months since integrating mParticle, we've been able to build an entire interconnected system where our channels actually talk to each other, which is not often heard of. And as we're building, we always keep these 5 principles in mind, which is what does a marketing stack have to be, or what should it be to reach that ideal state? And with the context that we talked about, one big piece of it is it has to be future-proof. And what does future-proof mean? It means that it's modular and it's extensible. And so, we purposefully lean towards best-in-class stacks as opposed to marketing clouds, because we said, okay, the world's changing so fast, no company can actually keep up with the bleeding edge of technology in every single area. So how do we pick the right vendors and then create a system where it's actually easy to swap out vendors when one falls behind? So that's when we talk about future-proof, and it also has to be real-time. So even if we don't have a real-time use case today in a particular area, anything that we build there has to be real-time ready. That's like, absolute has to, because as we get further into this world, we can't end up in a state where we have to rebuild everything or rebuild pieces from platforms that were not real-time ready. And as we go into machine learning and deep learning and trying to create experiences in real time, everything has to be there. Another piece is it has to be cross-channel. So, we have to really get away from the world, in the industry, get away from the world of siloed channels. And it's certainly easier said than done, especially with limitations around identity. But this is, something that has helped us to, say we can have 30% of our known users as a random number talking to one another and creating efficiencies across channels where we can identify them on multiple channels. Well, there's huge value in just that. And then the challenge becomes not having the tools in place to be cross-channel, but the challenge becomes how do we get more pieces of the identity puzzle in order to get that number higher. And so it's a mindset that helps us focus on the right problems. But everything has to be built for cross-channel. Another piece is everything has to be rapidly deployable. So when we look at, where do we want to build our marketing stack versus partner in our marketing stack, it's very much we prefer to go with vendors, and then we prefer to spend our resources on problems that have not been solved in the market yet, or that we don't feel have been solved sufficiently. And so rapid deployment is really about how do we minimize our development time spent on standing up vendors or integrating systems. And so, to give you an example here, I'll give a shout out to Justin Vita, who I know is on the line here. But we, recently started doing some testing with Braze, and when we said we want to have a real-time one-to-one push messaging and email coordination. And we've worked with a number of email providers over the years, but because we had mParticle already in place there, we were able to get a Braze stood up and ready to send emails in 8 days. That's rapid deployment. And when we're not working, connected to mParticle or connected to a CDP layer in general, these are projects that take in the magnitude of years, 1 year to 18 months. So, I think, Braze is a great system. I think the real piece here that stands out to me is with mParticle, we're able to, I have multiple use cases of this where we're able to stand things up in orders of magnitude faster than we were able to before, and we can kind of just move on to the next thing. And that's how you stay relevant in a rapidly changing world. Another example there is machine learning. From when we were doing machine learning on-prem, it would generally take us at least a few weeks to deploy a model into production and have it start to talk to our marketing channels. But because of mParticle and the existing integrations into all the channels and the data structure of IDs with attributes, we're able to stand up new machine learning models and have them immediately start talking to production channels or our API channels or our email providers within a day. So these are the types of changes that this has actually enabled in how we operate in the market. And I think that goes back to the market conditions of we are in such heated competition. There are certainly macroeconomic situations of cheap money that make a situation where everybody is investing right now into their platforms. And so we have to be able to keep up with that rapid pace of change. And what that enables is arbitrage. If we look at ad spend, the advertising side, you really only get super efficient dollars in customer acquisition when you have arbitrage opportunities. And arbitrage is available for some short period of time, and those periods of time are getting shorter and shorter. So how do we create a system where we can jump at new opportunities faster than anybody else and capture those arbitrage opportunities? That's really what we're focused on there.
This really
yeah, go ahead.
Possible because of the fact that there is a persistent connection available for the identity of the users within this entire data process. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say it's the identity and it's the single stream of data. So whether we're getting, if you look at the slide on the screen, it's all of the interactions from every channel and from our website are using the same data structure going into mParticle. And so when you actually push that into our machine learning engine, you have a unified data set already. And so what it does is it eliminates all of the data engineering needs, or much of the data engineering needs, because you're able to roll up consistent data into machine learning features. And then because you have that consistent identifier at the end of your machine learning process, you're able to write machine learned attributes back into mParticle that you can take action off of immediately. So you have those persistent connections, you have the data structure, and then you have the identity. And kind of those three pieces enable this world of rapid deployment.
That's great. It's super interesting and impressive that this works. Amazing.
No, we certainly didn't do it ourselves. So the only other pieces in our principles there are, one, we need consistent measurement. That goes back to the data. And so when we think about why do we need consistent measurement, it's testing. So mParticle has some features for testing automation, and the velocity of testing is actually the most important thing. So when we actually, I'm a human being. When I come up with a test that we should do, chances are the test is not going to help. If we assume that most of our tests will be wrong, not because of some inherent issue in how we come up with tests, but because of the fact that just most tests are wrong, you actually can't improve, your end goals by increasing the quality of your tests. The thing that you actually have to change in order to grow and make improvements faster is to improve the velocity of your testing. So having those consistent data structures and the ability to toggle tests on and off as quickly as possible increases our velocity of testing. And then, because, when I'm wrong 75% of the time, it doesn't matter. And we can assume that we have some baseline of incorrect tests, but as long as we test faster, we will grow faster than our competitors. And then the final piece that we talk about in our marketing stack is identity. And that's, critical with mParticle. There's a lot of pieces that go into it. But the critical piece there on the CDP layer is how do we resolve those identities against each other? Because we have all these different types of identities from different sources. How do we create a data structure that allows us to pull user information by whichever identity we choose?
Well, and especially in a business where you're working with a web product as well as the mobile apps, I'm sure that would otherwise be quite challenging.
Oh yeah, it would be a mess otherwise, to be perfectly honest. Without being able to, ping based on the identity that we have at the time, based on the context, and pull back the same user attributes as if the user was on web or mobile or vice versa. It keeps the experience consistent for the user while enabling us to take action on that identity in the context in which the user is in.
Makes sense. Absolutely. So how do you use, you touched upon this briefly before, but how do you use machine learning models to inform marketing specifically?
Yeah, so, I guess there's the question of how do we do it technologically? And so technologically, what we do is we stream data from mParticle into our data warehouse. And in the data warehouse, we have automated feature rollups. So that's kind of where we create user features, and we have a pool of features built on mParticle or mParticle data that's in the many hundreds to just about 1,000 features. And those features then become available to any model. Then from our data warehouse, we have our machine learning platform that plugs into our data warehouse and can pull those features and write back the outputs of whatever model we want back into mParticle as an attribute. And that's, that to me is where we start to realize, we start to push the boundaries and realize the full capabilities of the CDP layer, is when we write machine learned attributes into mParticle. And so we use that for things like knowing when to send an email, what content to show a user, knowing when to recommend a loyalty program, when to what channel to advertise to somebody on. So for example, if somebody is a consistent opener of emails, we probably want to pull them out of audiences on mParticle, or on Facebook or AdWords. And so mParticle enables us to do that, because when we write back into mParticle, we can write attributes back there based on their channel propensity and use that to pull people in and out of audiences on paid channels. So we're not spending money on users who would convert through own channels otherwise. That would be one example of it. We use mParticle to and machine learning for our in-house DSP. So we're passing data back into mParticle that gets pushed into a Redis cluster for real-time bidding. And so, we have that mParticle data set. It allows us to identify things like how likely a user is to purchase. So we can adjust how much we're bidding for them in a real-time bidding context. We know, what the expected value of their purchase is. And that, combined with channel propensities, really gives us a good concept of how much value there is from a particular user. And so we use mParticle there for any machine learning models that are user-centric. The output of those models goes into mParticle, and it kind of plugs into how all of the different channels speak to each other, and then how those different channels behave. And the audiences functionality has been really valuable for us there. Not only can we go do things like, say in mParticle, we could say only put people in this audience who have a conversion propensity over 80%, and maybe we want to exclude those people or bid lower on them because the incremental value of an ad impression is lower. When we get into more advanced use cases, what we can do is we can just say from our machine learning platform, what audience is this user in? So even if there's not, even if there's no Boolean string you could put together to determine what audience the user should be in, you can still use that real-time audience compilation feature by defining what audience a user should be in through machine learning, and then using mParticle to actually activate those audiences. So I think there's a lot of really interesting use cases there that have been pretty fruitful for us.
That makes a lot of sense and is very sophisticated. I mean, that's just, it sounds like that must have tremendous impact on marketing outcomes as well.
Yeah, we've seen very significant improvements in efficiency across all of our marketing spend since we started this project about 8 months ago.
That's fantastic. And so what models are you using for a lot of this machine learning and all the attributes that you spoke of?
Yeah, so the ones I'll get into today, we have lots of various efforts going on in the data science side, and one thing to just point out there is that we've gotten to a point where our data scientists are doing data science, and they're not doing data engineering. So that's really enabled us to dramatically increase the breadth of different problems we're trying to solve with machine learning in the marketing context. As far as some of the ones we're using today, for example, today we have a time of day model that writes the ideal time of day to contact a user back into mParticle. We use that for push messaging, we use it for email, we use it for our DSP. We have channel propensity models going in, so we know which channels you're most likely to interact with, and we use that to pull people in and out of audiences. We know, we have models for your expected purchase value, and we use that to determine how much we should bid on you on paid channels and kind of group people into audiences of similar values. One huge issue on the API channels, like Facebook and AdWords, is that you could create a pixel-based audience, but everybody gets clustered into the same bid. And so how do you, so you might have users who have a really high expected value and users who have a really low expected value and have different conversion propensities, all getting the same bid. And so being able to group users with a similar expected value into the same audience, custom audiences on Facebook, for example, allows us to give all of those users a similar bid because they have the same, those ad impressions are going to create the same, a similar value. So that's one that we think is huge for creating efficiency. We also look at things like category and product affinity. So when we're sending an email to somebody, what should we show them? And there we look at what categories are they most interested in, what product recommendations. I would say probably for most of the attendees, the concept of personalization started with recommendations or product recommendations, and I think a lot of the world is still operating in that paradigm. But for us, we've taken, mParticle's allowed us to take a different approach to this, which is that like literally everything should be personalized. And so how do we get there? We get there with all of these different types of models, and then we take the outputs of those models and we use those in new models that determine what experience we should give a user at any given time. So there's all these different pieces, and I think they're a nice interim play in many cases, and they're a nice end state play in some cases. But as we move towards the world of artificial intelligence, it is coming, and we all have to be ready for it. Even though if we think of ourselves as retailers or pure play e-commerce, whatever it might be, artificial intelligence is coming, and we kind of have to be ready for when it does. And so this is kind of the first step towards getting to that world and being able to operate effectively in that world with true one-to-one personalization.
Yeah, and it's just incredible that the level of orchestration too that's involved in this case, because you're really looking across a very large and robust marketing program. That it's definitely it's incredible that it is possible to orchestrate at that magnitude.
Yeah, I guess that's the power of the cloud. The elasticity of compute resources kind of has changed the world for us in that respect, in able to, in terms of being able to scale these programs effectively and pretty efficiently. And I think mParticle has been really helpful there.
Great. And I mean, it's obvious from user experience to shopping on overstock.com. Would you be able to talk to us a little bit about what impact this has had for the marketing programs as a whole?
Yeah, so I would say the most important thing that has changed, or the most important impact that mParticle has had on marketing, it's not a headline for sure. It is that it has changed our mindset about what we can actually do and what is possible. And as soon as that mindset shifted and we started to say, okay, you have a database of every single user who's visited your site, all of the attributes associated with him or her, and all of the events associated with him or her. What could you do with that? The change in mindset has been just staggering. And what that's enabled us to do is really come up with a vision for where we want to take our marketing tech and understand, instead of having all of our really smart people in silos in their channels, now we have all of our just absolute best in class people thinking about everything as a singular problem or a singular vision to achieve. And we're at a point now where mParticle's working with mParticle and many of our partners, but really having this mindset of what data for marketing might look like has enabled us to, we know now where we want to be 3 years from now, and we know exactly how to get there. And that's been the biggest change. Things that have kind of come from that speed of deployment. As I said, we've basically changed our entire marketing stack in 8 months. And that includes data warehouses, machine learning platforms. It includes, core infrastructure. It includes linking. It includes the platforms that we use for messaging. It includes, things that we're doing on the content side. All of that has changed with a relatively small team, and has gotten to a world that's going to enable us to achieve our vision of delivering just what she wants in every single case. We have seen upticks in our conversion rate. Some of our models have had multi-million-dollar effects on our bottom line, and I would say that the other effect that we've had is because our channels talk to each other, we've had massive improvements in our spend efficiency. We spend a good chunk of dollars every year on advertising, and we've been able to improve our efficiency by about 10% in the past year through these programs. Which is 10% of our budget is a lot of money. And that's allowed us to really invest in pushing this platform forward and growing our customer base, which, in the context of our market, growth is by far the most important thing right now. And to have those extra dollars to be able to push towards that has really been invaluable.
That's incredible. And so with some of those extra, dollar resources, you just wondering what some of your future plans may look like, or kind of where you plan to take this amazing vision next?
I think there's certainly, when we think about the whole picture, there's the question of who is the user and, all of the details that go along with that. And, identity is certainly the hardest part of bringing that up to where it needs to be. So I think there will be, we will invest a lot more in identity. We will continue to invest in the user side. There's this whole other question of, okay, all this information about a user. What do you do with it? How do you change their experience given this data? And that's really where the majority of our effort is focused on today is how do we take all of this information and connect it to creating the absolute best customer experience on the planet.
That's amazing. I can't wait to continue shopping on Overstock once see what the new experience looks like in the coming quarters.
Yeah,
Great.
We've got a lot of good stuff up our sleeves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, is there anything else that you want to share, or should I start looking at some of the questions that came from the audience?
Yeah, I think we can move on to questions.
Sounds great. So I think we got one around the machine learning platform and whether or not it's in-house or a third party. Also, if there are extensions that you use through mParticle for machine learning.
So we do not use any extensions for machine learning. What we use to get data back into mParticle from our machine learning platform is we just use a Kinesis stream. So it's actually just really simple. As far as our machine learning platform, we work in marketing. We work primarily with Databricks, and we have some custom applications built on top of that for versioning and model deployment. But most of the work for the data scientists occurs in Databricks.
Okay, great. We have one other question. What would you say is the next big thing in marketing technology that Overstock is considering?
I would say, I think the next big thing is going to be universal identity. That we're certainly looking at lots of ways to better identify our customers. We have, I think we're pretty well at the front of the pack now in terms of the systems that we have for creating attributes for users and acting on those attributes. But I'm still not. We're still not where we want to be in terms of the percentage of our customers that we can identify and the percentage of our customers that we can speak back to channels with on a common identity. So I think there's lots of investments there, and then I would say the experience piece. It's great to have all of this data, but if it's not informing the customer experience, then that's a problem. And so right now it informs certain ways in which we interact with customers, but there's just so much more that we can do there. And I think that's kind of where we can hopefully set ourselves apart in terms of building things that are unique to the market.
Sounds good. And we actually just got in one more, it looks like, if we have the time. Seems like a lot of these questions are jogging you questions, which is great. How do you combine attribution data into mParticle?
Yeah, so as far as attribution data in mParticle, we do all of our attribution outside of mParticle today, and we feed that into bidding systems. But the attribution and mParticle are disconnected today.
Got it. Okay. They're definitely, and just as a FYI to the attendee that asked that question, when I had been the end user of the mParticle services for Guilt, we did actually use mParticle for our attribution because it allowed us to have actually a lot of similar reasons for flexibility in terms of testing various partners, as well as looking at pivoting measurement models. So similar reasons to you, Craig, and having that flexibility and future proofing. Future proofing definitely a big piece of it.
Yeah.
And then just one last question that also has come in since the last one. Okay, let me start from the beginning. There's a few questions packed into this one. How many data scientists work at Overstock? Is the first part of the question. And how has that changed over time? And how did leadership decide to invest in those resources?
Yeah, I won't answer the first question, but as far as how we've increased our investment in data science quite a bit, I think especially over the last year. As far as how leadership decided to invest in those resources, I think it's just, as far as how they decided, I don't know if I can speak to that specifically, just because I'm not sure what the executive thought process was behind that. Besides, we have all this data and data science, and we want to improve both our efficiency and automation. And I think we come from a heavy automation mindset here, and I think machine learning plays a lot into being able to automate things effectively. I think as far as how there's probably more to that, which is kind of how do you sell leadership on investing in data science resources. And to me, that's kind of having clear direction as far as what the output of data science should be, and having good problems for it. And I think as we've come up with a couple of use cases where our data scientists performed extraordinarily and made big impacts on the business, we've been able to, one, it's helped us identify more use cases for data science and helped us sell the impact that that investment can have.
Great. Okay. And if we do have time, we did get one more in. It looks like it's around the audience creation and orchestration between them, and kind of how that works given the platforms, like the mParticle platforms, as well as Braze, have powerful segmentation capabilities.
Yep. So Lucas, good to meet you. I've worked with Andre a couple times over the past several years. As far as how we, I think they're a bit different. One, as far as Braze goes, who we communicate via push or any push and email service, we don't want to segment that, and so we don't. So we do, and when I think segmentation, I think audiences. And so we don't, we want it to be one-to-one. And so we don't place any limitations on who can be contacted via email and push. What we do want is to have coordination between the various push channels and, making sure that users get their push in the right place. And we're not just like sending a web push and an app push and an email all at the same time to the same user. The mParticle, as far as our paid and API audiences, we do all of those through mParticle. I wouldn't say that, pretend to be an expert on where the best place to do that is. I think certainly you have multiple very capable platforms. For us, it's about creating our audiences closer to the machine learning platform, and that's kind of why we've done most of that with mParticle.
Makes a lot of sense. Great. Well, thank you so much, Craig, for taking us through and for showing us this once in a lifetime look into the personalization engine. Such interesting stuff. And to all of our listeners as well, if you have any other questions that you didn't get time to ask or have any new ones that come up, please feel free to reach out. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.